This week in Psych 300, we're talking about undergraduate research opportunities. I'm Dr. Moen, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about why research is important, how you can start getting involved in research, and the different opportunities that are available to you. So the general sentiment I hear from students when I bring up research is a lot of people will tell me to my face that they just hate research and they don't want to do it. They don't understand why it's important. It seems really convoluted and overly complicated, and they just don't like it. So what I hope you take away from this video is how important research is, regardless of if you don't actually conduct research after you graduate. So the first thing is I want you to keep in mind that research is more than just sitting in a lab. So sometimes people think of research as completing these really long surveys or doing different experiments on different types of chemicals in a lab or lots of paperwork and poring over these data sets, and that certainly is research. But I want you to imagine a scenario. The vast majority of students in our major want to go into some type of clinical mental health field. So I want you to imagine yourself as a therapist, and you are told by a friend that there's this new type of therapy that is really, really beneficial. And you're trying to figure out if it's worth it to use this therapeutic approach with your clients. And so you need some way to determine if this new approach is better than what you're doing. So maybe you have a couple of clients who consent to try this new type of therapy, and you take notes on how much they improve over a specific period of time. Maybe you ask them subjectively, do you feel like this is helping? What do you think of this compared to the other approach we were taking? And you take all of that information, and then you make a judgment of, yeah, I'm gonna update my therapy practices, or nope, I'm gonna stick with something that's worked in the past because it works just as well. What you've just done is the really basic elements of a research project. You asked a question and formed a hypothesis, collected data, analyzed those data, and drew a conclusion. So even if you don't end up conducting really typical elements of research in a career later on, almost every field relies on research to some extent, and we're going to talk about that more. It's also important that you understand the difference between a research consumer and a research producer. And these are really two different roles. Research consumers are people who read research that's out there, who understand research that's been conducted. It could be anywhere from being presented on the news to being in an academic journal article. Research producers are people that are producing research themselves, or creating new research and disseminating that, giving it out so that research consumers can get that information. So you could be one or both of these things. All the faculty at UNK are both research producers and research consumers. And by the end of your undergraduate degree, you will be too. You have to produce research in several classes in the psych department, and I would argue that you're probably going to consume research in every single class that you take. So let's talk a little bit about these two roles and why they're important. So why is this producer role important? Well, it gives us a deeper understanding of psychology. It helps us know what we know. Everything that we know about the field of psychology comes from research. So if you're really interested in a specific area, maybe sleep disorders, well, how we understood sleep disorders and when they happen and how to treat them is from research. Research also gives you understanding about problem solving, attention to detail, and critical thinking. Now, you might say, okay, Dr. Moen, I'm not going to go to grad school. I don't want to be a researcher. I shouldn't have to do research. It doesn't matter for me. Well, okay, fair, but regardless of what job you have, your boss is probably going to require that you be able to solve some problems and think on your feet. They're also probably going to want to know that you can pay attention to detail and think critically and critically evaluate a situation to come to the best possible solution. It doesn't matter what type of job you are, your boss is going to want to know that you can solve problems when you encounter them and pay attention to those little details. And that's really what research is. Now, research producing is also required if you want to go to graduate school, regardless of what graduate program that is, and it's required for some jobs. Some jobs are going to require that you go read information, come to a conclusion, and share that information with other people. That's research. Now, why is the consumer role important? What being a research consumer is your ability to read, understand, analyze, or evaluate, and apply that information. So you should be able to see something or read something, know what they're trying to tell you, interpret whether what they're trying to tell you is accurate or not, and then take that information and apply it to a new situation. This is also important because you should be a critical consumer of information. I want you to challenge where information is coming from and want to understand if it's coming from a reliable, valid scientific source. This is important because pseudoscience and misinterpretations are everywhere. If you turn on the evening news, you're gonna find misinformation or a misinterpretation of data. My favorite, which I'm sure you've already heard in many classes, is when people incorrectly apply or conclude that just because something's correlated, that one thing causes another. You could watch the news and they could say, oh, new study shows that eating chocolate makes you live longer. That's not a causal relationship. Eating chocolate might be correlated with an increased lifespan. That doesn't mean that one thing's causing the other. So hopefully by this point, I've convinced you that research is important and that you should care, even if you don't think that it's directly related to your job. But it's also important to remember that research is everywhere. Research has to do with how tall your desk is. Research is involved with where the volume knob was placed in your car. There's a ton of research on heads-up displays in cars and if they're safe and how to make them less distracting. The yellow light at a stoplight, the duration of that is based on research. Nearly everything that we do in our everyday life comes from research being conducted in some setting. I also want you to keep in mind that every single career relies on research. Now, it might not be producing research, but certainly research informs that field. So how a truck grabs a garbage dumpster and dumps it in the back is based on research. The timing of how long and the order of which to cook different food is based on research. And so no matter what your feelings about research coming into the psychology major or starting this class, I want you to keep in mind that everything that we do in our everyday life is related to research. And it's really important that you can understand that process and learn to think critically, pay attention to detail, and solve problems. So now I'm just going to go out on a limb here and say that I'm pretty confident that all of you are super excited about research. And so you might be thinking, okay, I want to do research. What do I do now? How on earth do I get interested or in touch with a faculty member, and how do I get involved? The first thing you can do is reach out to the faculty member whose research is most interesting to you. If you go back to the first part of this class, there's a video that I also made on different areas of research for all of our faculty in the department. So if you think that memory and attention is really interesting, you should contact me, Dr. Moen, and I'll talk to you about research opportunities. If you have no idea where to start, but you're just interested in research, talk to your academic advisor about advising. Stop your professor after class and chat with them, or stop by office hours. Once you've found a person that you want to work with, one really good way to sort of get an idea of what they do or what working with them is like is to either ask to volunteer in their lab or sit in on a lab meeting. Not all faculty members have lab meetings. Most of us have some type of research meeting with our students on a fairly regular basis. Now, when I have a student that wants to come work with me, I often like to say, hey, do you just want to, sit in on a couple meetings, maybe volunteer for an hour a week for a couple weeks, just to sort of see what it would be like working together. Then you need to start thinking about which research program is best for you. And we're going to talk about those in the next slides. Now, keep in mind, with some of these research opportunities, it's going to be important that you will have taken some psychology classes. So I typically require, if I'm going to do like an individual research project with somebody, it's really important that they've taken behavioral statistics, Psych 250, and research methods 1 at least, which is Psych 270. It's even better if they've taken Psych 271. It's not a requirement, but it's something that I think helps students be more successful. If they just want to volunteer in my lab, generally I think it works best if students have at least taken a class with me before. So I know a little bit about the student and the student knows a little bit about me. Now, these are my own general guidelines, but every faculty member is different. So when you reach out to a faculty member, you can ask, hey, do you want me to have taken a class with you? What classes do you want me to take? Those types of things. There's several research opportunities in the psychology department. We have 2 opportunities where you can take a class to get research experience, and these are electives. So they're outside of the core curriculum of like 270, 271, 495. These are separate from that. There's also 2 paid research opportunities on campus, which is the Undergraduate Research Fellows Program and the Summer Student Research Program. Now, these last 2 are paid opportunities, and there'll be a separate video that talks about those. So for now, let's talk about 399 and 499. 399 is Psychology Apprenticeship. This is a class where you assist faculty with their research. Maybe you're collecting data, maybe you're reading articles, maybe you're going through data sets. And you can register for this with any faculty member that's willing to work with you. And you can do 1, 2, or 3 credit hours, and that corresponds to 3, 6, or 9 hours of work per week. This isn't a regular class where you go and you sit in class for 2.5 hours a week and listen to a lecture. It's a class where you're getting hands-on research experience, helping a faculty member with their own research. This is often where students start working with a faculty member. If they don't have a really strong idea of exactly what they want to research, they might do 399 for a semester and really get a good grasp on what that faculty member does and what working with them is like before they tackle their own individual research project. 499 is Research in Psychology. That's the name of the class. 499 involves designing and completing your own research project while being mentored by a faculty member. This is a 3 credit hour class, and the goal of this class is for you to come up with an idea, design your study, collect data, analyze those data, and draw conclusions. Write up a paper at the end on everything that you've done that semester. Again, this isn't going to be a regular class where you're sitting in the room for a specific time every single week, but you'll have meetings with your professor and you'll work on this research project throughout the semester. Be sure to check out the other video on other ways that you can get involved in research with paid opportunities through URF or SSRP. And remember to reach out to your advisor, your professors, if you have any questions about getting involved in research.